So welcome everyone to our weekly Path of Awakening class. We are moving through Mind at Ease by Traleg Rinpoche. And we're doing the second half of chapter 8 on tranquility meditation, which is a translation of the term shamatha, which you may be more familiar with. It has to do with pacifying the mind. So I'd like to start this evening by taking a good posture, upright, erect, upright. There's a good word. You can call it upright. So you straighten your back. That's good. Thank you, Barry. And bring your awareness just here into this space, this room. Aware of nothing in particular at the moment, and of anything and everything. So here, there's the window and what's outside the window, trees, and the TV screen, the computer screen in front of me. And for each one of us has a particular set of sensory objects that we're aware of, the sounds, bodily sensations, now that I mention it. But you just rest your mind here. You're aware of nothing in particular, anything and everything. It's effortless. It's effortless, clear awareness. It includes thoughts. Thoughts come and go. And here we rest. This awareness is without any effort. It's clear. It has no predilections. It doesn't favor this or that. You don't have to be aware of this or that. Anything that happens to present itself. So these words are kind of prominent at the moment. This is your computer screen with all of the images on it. This is the way we enter into tranquility meditation. It's tranquil because we're not trying to do anything. There's no effort involved in this. Give up any effort. Let it go. Sometimes you may find that your mind has gone off on a thought and you've gotten lost in a dream for a little bit. And then you realize that and you're back. And here we are in this space. This space is open. It's lucid. It's luminous in the sense that there are colors and sounds and tactile sensations. If your partner's cooking dinner, maybe a smell, who knows? Anything and everything that can arise is just fine. It arises, everything, and passes away in the moment, continually. This awareness is always with us. Occasionally we lapse into dream. We go off and we are visiting our mother in Schenectady or our sibling in Oshkosh and having a conversation, and then we realize we're dreaming and we're back here because this is the ground. This is where we live. It's where we constantly dwell. And when we go off into dreams for a little bit, inevitably the dream wears out and we're back here. And being back here, you can be aware of anything and everything that arises, and that includes thoughts. We are thinking beings. We are human beings, and thoughts will come and go. Sometimes they'll take you away, and you won't even realize that you're lost in a dream until you do realize it, and then you're not. Other times, you can just be sitting here and you're thinking, what's for dinner? Or I've got an itch, or is this worthwhile? Or, what's for dinner tomorrow? All these little thoughts come and go, and we can view them, see them, including emotions. I'm so happy, or I'm feeling sad. And we just see these emotions coming and going, just like this gesture as it appears across the screen, a momentary happening. So let's just sit here for a while and relax. If your mind goes off into a thought, a dream, like, gosh, I don't understand this, eventually it wears out, and here we are, back again. And you can see those thoughts, those dreams, as though they were objects, just like this hand on the screen or the sound of this word. Anything and everything. There's no should or shouldn't. No should or shouldn't. There's just awareness or the absence of it as we go off into dream and come back. And when we're back, we're back. It's one or the other. Whatever thought you might be having, just see that. That becomes an object of awareness. You might be thinking, I don't understand this. There's a thought, and then it's gone. They don't last very long, do they? But the awareness, this clear space, is always here, waiting when we go off into dream, and just present when we're not dreaming. I'd say, okay, you can relax now. But that's ridiculous. That's what we're doing. Isn't this amazing? This is the very essence of meditation. It's the ultimate relaxation. If you're not relaxed, see that, and then that will go too. That tension, that'll dissolve, and here we are. Effortless. It's amazing. The basis of this path is utterly effortless. Isn't that terrific? You don't have to work hard, quite the reverse. We have to relax thoroughly into awareness. So we'll start with the chapter, which is really just going to be explaining all this in even more detail, I suppose. This is tranquility meditation without an object. Tranquility meditation means shamatha, and it's essential that we understand this because it is the basis for the next and more profound kind of meditation, which is called vipassana or insight meditation. Shamatha is necessary for us to understand and practice in order to be able to practice vipassana. Vipassana is what will take us to enlightenment itself. But its foundation, its basis, is this shamatha, this resting in clear awareness. Last week we talked about tranquility meditation, shamatha, with an object. Now we're talking about it without an object, although it starts actually with an object. Go figure. Because when we rest in this awareness, we can see all these different things, thoughts, visual objects, sounds, all these become apparent. And these are objects. So he says, In this practice, it is not necessary to use an external object or the breath to anchor our concentration. We're not anchoring our concentration. We're opening our concentration to this space. The focus of this technique is simply mind itself. And by mind, what he's talking about here is this awareness that's always here. It's lucidity. It's constant cognizance of one thing or another. And this is the practice. Come back to this. He says, from the Mahamudra point of view, we do not desire meditative equipoise. That means we're not trying to still the mind, and focus it one pointedly on an object and sort of freeze. We're not doing that. And we don't have an aversion to discursive thought or emotions. We view both with equanimity. That is, whenever you come out of the dream and you see the thought that you're having, that's it. Nothing more to do. When you see that emotion that you're having, that's it. Nothing more to do. You're back. The point of this practice is to maintain awareness of our mental states. Yeah, we come back from dreams and here we are. We're aware of our mental states. What's my mental state right now? It's clear. I'm thinking about, what am I going to say next? Okay, there's a thought. We simply recognize discursive thoughts and emotions. We see them when they happen. They will arise, he says, as transient phenomena. They come and they go. They're completely impermanent, transient. They arise, persist for a short while, and then they're gone. That's what happens with all thought, all mental events. He says the transience of thought is revealed by how difficult it can be to grasp a thought. You try and hold it. What am I thinking? Oh, there it is. Oh, it's gone. When we try, it is already gone and another one has appeared in its place. So we sit in tranquility meditation, we sit in the same posture, but now instead of with eyes closed, we gaze straight ahead into space with eyes wide open, which is what we do anyhow, because we're really practicing this more advanced form of meditation, you might say, in our daily practice. That's what Rinpoche gave us. So you sit with your eyes open, you look straight ahead, and whatever is going to present itself, this space, the room, the window, the computer screen, all of our friends on the computer screen. We don't deliberately pay attention to whatever thoughts and emotions arise. We don't deliberately do it, or do not arise, but with unadulterated simplicity. This is so simple. If it doesn't seem simple, then you're complicating it unnecessarily. We relax into a state of awareness without thinking about anything in particular and allowing anything in particular to arise. But we have no need, we have no goal, we have no aim, we have no purpose. What freedom! We have tremendous freedom. This could make us really happy, joyful. We can relax into awareness without any should or shouldn't, without any good or bad, doing it or not doing it. If you think, now I'm doing it, that's another thought. If you think, I'm not doing it, that's another thought. Just see it, and it goes. You can't hold on to them. They go poof, they evaporate. And here we are. Here we are. In the practice of tranquility with object, we were urged to observe our thoughts. But here we are not meant to be observing anything at all, and yet we can observe anything at all. We simply look straight ahead and allow discursive thoughts to come and go without paying particular attention to them. What that means is we have no purpose. We're not trying to do this or that with them. We see them, fine, and they come and they go. And you've got no purpose, no should or shouldn't, nothing you are supposed to be doing. And if you think you are, that's another thought. And you let that go, as it will. It's a matter of allowing ourselves to slip into a relaxed state and then remaining that way for however long, short, long, with clarity and lucidity. That's what this space is. It's clear and lucid. The space of awareness, our fundamental ongoing awareness, is clear and lucid. He says it's imperative that awareness be present at all times. Well, good luck. If you can, great. And if you can't, don't matter. Just let it go. Eventually it'll come. And it will be present for however long it is. And it might be short, it might be long. And there are 3 stages of this tranquility meditation without attributes. The first is called stabilizing the agitated mind. We do begin with an object of meditation, maybe the breath. Although it is important not to focus on that object too intently. In other words, we're not really trying to beat ourselves up like, oh, I got to come back to the breath. Oh, I'm a bad person because I lost the breath. Forget that. We just sort of see it in the beginning. The mind should be restrained from wandering from the meditative object, yet it should remain relaxed. We just see it, and then it's gone. It is important not to mistake the object of meditation for the function of meditation, he says, which is to enhance and develop your awareness. That's the function of meditation. And this awareness becomes more and more solid, more and more ongoing, more and more continuous, the more you relax into it. Just try to be aware of the object in question, the breath, without grasping at it or trying to focus too intently. Yeah, too much effort gets in your way. He says at times your vision may become blurred, or you may feel that the object is moved and then so on. If that happens, stop focusing on this object for a while and gaze straight into space, trying to relax in that state without directing the mind to any particular object. Just relax. Relax is the byword. Because once you're able to maintain this awareness for however long, might be a few seconds, might be minutes, your mind will slowly become lucid and you will experience mental ease, the lack of effort, the lack of should and shouldn't, mental ease. Beware of entertaining either hope or fear, he says. This, put it on your refrigerator. And do not apply any kind of physical or mental exertion. It's all about relaxing into this awareness because it's already here. Any physical or mental exertion is just a little dream. We're lapsed into dream, just like we dream at night. The object of meditation is now simply the mind itself. This is the mind, right here. We're all living it, experiencing it. This awareness of whatever is presenting itself. The thoughts and emotions are not so much used as an object of focus, but are simply kept in awareness and allowed to rise and dissipate of their own accord. You make no attempt to control them. If you do, that's another dream. You allow thoughts and emotions to arise and pass of their own accord. He says, Mahamudra experience isn't created. It will arise spontaneously. So the more we rest here, the more vivid, colorful, powerful this awareness will become. And don't look for it, because then that will block it. If you know how to let your mind rest in this manner, if you know how to let your mind rest, you will no longer be disturbed by discursive thoughts, but have a real sense of spaciousness. We give ourselves permission to rest without having to do anything in particular. And he says it is in the same vein, it is also important not to evaluate your experiences for indications of progress, good, and not to regard an inability to maintain this state for a long time as failure, bad. Important not to do that. We're giving ourselves freedom. The disturbing thoughts themselves will reveal the innate nature of mind. It's so ordinary. We're all becoming completely ordinary human beings, not spectacular, superior human beings, but really ordinary. I remember Trungpa Rinpoche once looking out at us and saying, the point of the path is to become a completely ordinary human being. He said, that's what the Buddha did. He became a completely ordinary human being. Then he looked at all of us sitting there and he said, you all want to be extraordinary. He said that kind of scornfully. Let it go. Cultivating this attitude will in time empty the mind of its unconscious content, which is all about shoulds and shouldn'ts, goals. And our karmic traces and dispositions will be purified because they're all about me and my purposes, me and my values, me and my good and bad. The second one is strengthening that stability. He says the practice of meditation is fraught with obstacles, all of which in the Mahamudra context fall under the categories of drowsiness or stupor or mental agitation. There are other obstacles, such as laziness, that have to be dealt with through contemplating the four preliminaries. Remember? Joyful to have such a human birth, difficult to find, free and well favored, but death is real. So, and this is the way we deal with laziness. We say, look, I'm going to die soon. And for some of us, it's sooner than later. And so that's the way we motivate ourselves to get going. But he says, but in terms of tranquility meditation, what we're doing here, these are the two real obstacles: drowsiness, stupor on the one hand, and excitation on the other, mental agitation. Stupor is a mental state deprived of clarity and lucidity, connected to torpor, almost like falling asleep. We get drowsy. So even if disturbing thoughts and emotions arise in the mind, we're unaware of them and are unable to distinguish positive from negative mental experiences. That's fine. Cures for drowsiness and stupor. And then he gives a bunch of things. Expand your chest, straighten your spine, have a good posture, open your eyes, gaze into the distance, splash water on your face, cool the room, take off clothing, shorten the session. That's a good one. Shorter sessions. Longer the session, the more likely we are to fall asleep. Take breaks, reduce food intake. Don't try to sit on a full stomach. Don't sit in the sun by the fire or by the fire. Engage in regular physical exercise and breathing exercises. All of this will counteract stupor, drowsiness, sleepiness. It's helpful to go for a walk and then cultivate mindfulness and awareness when you return to your sitting practice. You can do it on the walk too. You can just come back to wherever you happen to be walking. The cures for mental agitation. Those for that drowsiness and stupor. Now we're on mental agitation. Relax the mind and body. Eat nutritious food. get massaged, put on more clothing, take a break from practice. That's a good one. Take a break. You may need to analyze disturbing thoughts, but it is not the disturbing thoughts themselves, but our conceptualization about these thoughts that disturbs us. In other words, you can have all kinds of negative thoughts and just see them and let them go, and they will go. You can't hold on to them. The very nature of thought. The real source of drowsiness and agitation is our own conflicting emotions. Therefore, any form of purificatory practice is extremely helpful. For instance, the four immeasurables, those kinds of contemplations that calm us. Another helpful method is to simply use the agitation, drowsiness, or stupor itself as the object of meditation, rather than attempting to apply antidotes. So if you're agitated, you just see that. And when you come back to awareness, here we are. When you're not aware, we're somewhere else. We've left the room. And then we realize that, and we come back, and we see that object, that thought that took us away, and we're back here, now. Rangjung Dorje, he was the third Karmapa, and perhaps the greatest of all the Karmapas. He writes in his prayer of Mahamudra, "Let the waves of subtle and coarse thoughts calm down into their own place, and the waters of mind without movement come spontaneously to rest." They come spontaneously, you don't make it happen. You just relax into it. Free from contaminations of discursiveness and sloth, may I establish a still ocean of shamatha. Obstacles to meditation. Thoughts that are immediately detectable because they're compelling. Oh my God, what am I having for dinner? Oh my God, I forgot to pay the bill. Subtler thoughts are unnoticeable without greater awareness. All these little thoughts, but we could be very easily aware of them. It's just that they're in contrast to all this. They're like little birds flying across the sky of this easy, open awareness that we rest in. And this thought goes across, what's for dinner? Rangjung Dorje teaches the way to deal with these obstacles, getting lost in dream, is not by trying to forcefully prevent them from making their appearance, but by permitting them to subside by themselves and allowing mental clarity to arise by itself. There it is. We will gradually overcome these two obstacles in this way. When you have developed this ability, you can think, now I've achieved real meditation, and feel proud. That's legitimate. That's okay. You're allowed to do that. To feel proud, we're allowed to do that. So the third one is actualizing mental stability. He says, at this stage, we need to focus our minds on a particular visual object. Could be the breath, could be a statue, could be anything. And gradually expand that focus to include all objects in the immediately surrounding area. It's so easy. You just be aware of all this, whatever it may be. Next, we choose a sound, smell, physical sensation, mental image, and try to focus on these sensory impressions, one at a time. So on the sounds of these words, on the visual object that you're looking at. Then we expand our focus to include the conflicting emotions that are generally considered something to be abandoned, love, hate, anxiety, all kinds of things. After that, we focus on virtuous thoughts, such as the practice of generosity, patience, morality, and so on. And then on neutral and trivial thoughts. All this means is that we become aware of anything and everything as it arises to our minds. All the different kinds of thoughts, positive, negative, neutral, unhappy, happy, unvirtuous, virtuous. The traditional teachings say that negative thoughts and emotions must be abandoned. This is the sort of the lower level teachings, way low, but below the Mahamudra teachings. From the Mahamudra perspective, that approach will only cause further disturbing thoughts to arise. You try to control your mind, hold it tight, eliminate certain kinds of thoughts, it invites them. Again, we should not regard disturbing thoughts as harmful or as having a deleterious effect, but instead accustom ourselves to simultaneously relaxing and being aware of these thoughts without reacting. We practice letting go of our thoughts or letting our attention rest naturally on their progress. You can just see their thoughts and then they go. And when they go by themselves, and then here we are for however long. You can't hold on to it, this awareness, because then that becomes another thought. In fact, he says another fresh thought will arise and take the place of the last. And I have this highlighted very much. He says the function of tranquility meditation is to maintain mindfulness and awareness. Here it is. Not to block out our thoughts and feelings, which is practically impossible to do in any case. This is a quote. The function of tranquility meditation is to maintain mindfulness and awareness, not to block out our thoughts and feelings, which is practically impossible to do in any case. There's another thing to put on the refrigerator. You can't block out your thoughts, because that becomes another big thought. We just see them and relax. We're being given such freedom to be. Through this practice, our thoughts will gradually stabilize. Even if disturbing thoughts continue to arise, you shouldn't feel disheartened. Simply be aware of them. That's all it takes. Because if you succeed in focusing your mind on thoughts, the thoughts themselves can become meditation. So if you succeed in just simply being aware of these thoughts, that's meditation again. Here we are. Practice mindfulness awareness intensively for short periods repeatedly. You can do this for short periods. So you don't have to be able to maintain it for long periods of time. You just do it for a short period of time, whenever you feel inspired. He says, this entails trying to detect everything that is going on in your mind, paying attention as carefully as you would if you're trying to spot an escaped prisoner in a crowd, or walk with a pot full of boiling oil. I think of it as like sometimes at dinner I've got this pot of maybe might be soup, and I'm delivering it to the dining room table, and I'm walking so carefully because I don't want to spill it because it's hot and messy. These two images are used frequently to describe intense mindfulness practice in Buddhist literature. Relaxing your meditation means ceasing this intensive focus and maintaining instead a general sense of mindfulness and awareness. Relaxing the mind into a sense of physical and mental well-being. Well-being. This is all about feeling well, feeling good, this sense of well-being. As in the traditional analogy, we relax in the way a bundle of wheat falls to the ground when the cord that binds it has been severed. And here we are, awake. That's the way we let go of our effort And here we are, awake. He says, by way of encouragement, remember that without eliminating the obstacles of mental stupor and agitation and attaining a tranquil mind, we will never be able to gain insight into the nature of our mind and attain liberation from our mental conflicting emotions. Let's reverse that. If you eliminate the obstacles of mental stupor and agitation, and if you attain a tranquil mind, then you will be able to go on to gain insight into the nature of our mind and attain liberation from the mental conflicting emotions. Kamala Shila, who was a great teacher who went to Tibet actually, says, the mind that has failed to achieve settled equipoise can in no way understand perfect reality as it is. And it's so ironic that to achieve mental equipoise is the utterly easy, it's what makes it difficult is that it's so easy we can't accept that. We want to try hard. So it's just a matter of relaxing into this. And with that, I'll turn this over to Michael.
Okay, so we'll be talking about the section of this book where Traleg Rinpoche talks about the 9 levels of resting the mind in tranquility. And I'm going to borrow as well from a chapter in the Path of Individual Liberation, chapter 31, Resting in Shamatha, where Trungpa Rinpoche talks about the 9 techniques of shamatha, because it's essentially the same material with some different language, which I think makes it easier to follow. But before I launch into those, I just want to say a couple of things just to summarize. That we come to understand what Mahamudra Shamatha or Mahamudra Tranquility Meditation is about. The basic idea is that if we're able to relax our mind, if we're able to settle the mind, then its true nature or its essence becomes apparent. But that ordinarily we're so distracted and so caught up that it's obscured. And so that's why shamatha is necessary in the beginning. But that the essence of shamatha ultimately is to rest in the effortless state that John described. And that's why if you were to read traditional Mahamudra teachings, a lot of times there's a lot of things that it says not to do. Don't speculate, don't think, don't reflect, don't analyze, rest naturally. And rest naturally meaning exactly what John said before, that we're not trying to create anything. We're just simply allowing ourselves to settle and experience what's there all the time, but is ordinarily obscured. Tsoknyi Rinpoche has an interesting quote. He says that lost in the display, we forget the essence. And what we're doing with shamatha practice is over and over again, ultimately coming back to that essence, ultimately coming back to the nature of mind. And that's ultimately what Mahamudra Shamatha is all about. So the 9 techniques are different things that we might do or different approaches we might take to help us settle so that we are in a place where we're simply allowing ourselves to be just as we are, and things to be just as they are, without trying to change anything, without trying to fix anything, without trying to do anything at all. Some teachers have said, simply we leave our minds alone. It's that simple. If we leave our minds alone, then our true nature will become apparent as we settle. Sometimes there are different analogies for this, like sediment slowly settling in muddy water so that eventually the water becomes clear. But the point being that the water by nature is clear to begin with, and it's the activity, it's the agitation, it's the distraction that muddies the water. So Traleg Rinpoche begins by saying the 3 stages of tranquility meditation without object that we just talked about are related to the 9 stages of resting the mind in tranquility. So the 3 stages of tranquility meditation were first stabilizing the agitated mind which really relate to the first four techniques primarily, or the first four stages, or the first four levels. Then secondly, strengthening that stability, which essentially relates mostly to stages 5 through 7, as we'll see. And then achieving or actualizing mental stability, which is the final stages, 8 and 9, particularly 9, which is meditative equipoise. So the idea of meditative equipoise in this context is exactly what John said, that we are able to rest in awareness of mindfulness awareness. We're able to rest undistracted in awareness with equanimity, meaning that whatever thoughts, feelings, perceptions arise, we're aware of them, but we're not swayed by them. We're not carried away by them. We're not distracted by them. So in that sense, there's equipoise, there's stability. And that stability comes from the practice of shamatha, or tranquility meditation. So Trungpa Rinpoche, in talking about the 9 stages, says that they're interconnected rather than sharply divided. But he also says they're not necessarily linear, that their sequence could be random, and that we might actually sit down sometimes in meditation and have an experience of equipoise very briefly right from the start. But ordinarily they're presented as, as some kind of a continuum. And this can be kind of paradoxical in one sense, because it will sound, and it's true, that there's something we're meant to recognize, something that we're meant to experience. But at the same time, we can't approach it with any kind of goal orientation. If we approach it with goal orientation, we immediately will get lost in the 2 veils that Traleg Rinpoche has talked about throughout this book. The first veil, if you remember, was cognitive distortion. We set a goal, we have some idea of something that we think exists, something that we think it is. And along with that, something we think it isn't. And so right there, we're lost in that, as opposed to seeing it in the fullness of what it is. And then secondly, we get lost in the second veil of conflicting emotions. If we have some idea of something we think we should be experiencing, and some idea of something we think we should not be experiencing, then we start picking and choosing and get caught up in what eventually leads to passion and aggression. So you can't get there from here, essentially. What we have to do is learn how to settle, how to relax the mind, how to relax any sense of effort. And when we do that, again, the true nature of mind will become apparent. I would also say that this chapter is littered with very excellent meditation instruction. And it's worth making a note on your calendar right now to read this chapter again, maybe in a month or 3 months, and see what becomes clear to you and how it might strike you differently than it did reading it for tonight's class. There are just single sentences that really are just so clear in terms of what the practice is, and instruction that's so clear about understanding the context of meditation, what we're doing when we're doing different things, that really it's been helpful to me, and I've just really appreciated reading this chapter. So just a couple of things before we go into talking about the 9 stages, just some things to keep in mind from what we've already read. He says that no matter what discursive thought presents itself to your mind, simply notice it and let it be. You should neither encourage, dwell upon, nor try to get rid of these thoughts, but simply regard them as just thoughts. He says Mahamudra regards shamatha as a way of settling discursive thoughts rather than eliminating them. There is no attempt to forcefully remove discursive thoughts or experiences of negative emotions. And then finally, from the point of view of Mahamudra, the criterion by which we judge whether we're meditating or not is whether awareness is present or not. So we'll begin now talking about the 9 techniques, as Trungpa Rinpoche called it, or the 9 levels of resting in shamatha. I'll also say that when Trungpa Rinpoche presented it, he talked about that the 9 levels or the 9 techniques correspond to 6 powers. That are both the effect that we get out of the techniques as well as the inspiration for practicing them. In other words, the 9 powers are both cause and effect. Traleg Rinpoche doesn't directly reference these, but it's embedded in what he presents. So I thought it might be helpful to it might be helpful to have some presentation around that as well. In any case, the first of the 9 techniques is resting the mind. And again, this corresponds most closely in terms of the 3 stages of resting the mind without an object. This corresponds most closely to stabilizing the agitated mind. So with resting the mind, sometimes called placement, we place or rest or direct attention to a chosen object, such as the breath, or could be on awareness itself, if we're able to just tune directly into that. Traleg notes that just this moment of resting, placing our attention on an object, gives some respite from continuous agitation. But this can be difficult initially, as the mind is fickle. So he says we do have to make a determined effort. And that's another thing I'd say about the 9 stages, that begin with some sense of effort, but ultimately resolve or settle into effortlessness. But with this one, there is some effort. And this corresponds to the power of learning. Basically, what have we learned? We've learned, first of all, to do the practice. But secondly, we've learned that there's a reason. There are reasons for practicing. There are reasons why we should practice. But basically, we've learned that it's possible to rest the mind, and that's a good thing to do. The second technique or second level is continuous resting, or Trungpa Rinpoche, almost the same thing, continuously resting. But in some texts, you might hear it as continuous placement. But the idea here is that if in the first step, in the resting the mind, we placed our attention on an object, such as the breath or a visual object, or awareness itself, that now we begin to extend how long we're able to rest or stay with the object with meditation. So some sense of continuity develops. And I think this is something we've all experienced in practice. The first 4 stages are pretty clearly experiential. The first, we find an object of some kind, or even if it's awareness itself, and then we extend the amount of time that we're able to rest with that object. Traleg says if you can rest even for a couple of seconds, this can be prolonged through the practice of mindfulness. And Trungpa Rinpoche explained this stage by saying you elongate or extend the spirit of your sitting practice as much as you can. We don't have to give in right away to discursive thoughts or to sounds, sights, or other distractions. Instead, we can extend our practice. And the second stage connects to the power of experiencing. And the idea is we begin to experience that resting the mind is possible, that we can actually do this practice. And this gives us tremendous encouragement. The third of the 9 stages, or third levels, Traleg Rinpoche calls patch-like resting. Trungpa Rinpoche called it literally resting, but it's the same idea. It's basically repeated placement, which is another term for it, that we begin to recognize when we become distracted, and we come back again and again and again. And Traleg Rinpoche says that this is significant because we're beginning to learn that we can practice meditation in both situations, that the mind that knows it's distracted is in awareness. So we recognize distraction and use mindfulness to return to tranquility meditation. We use mindfulness to return to the object. And he calls it patch-like because there are intermittent interruptions. Again, Trungpa Rinpoche called this literally resting. And by that, what he means is with this practice, we simply come back. He's using the word literal here to mean that's all that we do. We just recognize distraction and come back. We don't give in to any kind of further thought, any kind of self-criticism. We just literally, or even use the word naively, we just simply come back. And this is connected with the power of recollection, as is the next level, which comes back to the sense, as Traleg Rinpoche was talking about earlier in this chapter, of remembering what we're supposed to do. We remember that we're sitting on the cushion and we're practicing mindfulness. And just by remembering that, by remembering the practice, that we bring ourselves back. The fourth stage, Traleg Rinpoche called close placement. Trungpa Rinpoche called it closely resting. And the idea here is that we come back more quickly, essentially. We recognize distraction and we come back more readily, more easily, and more quickly. Traleg Rinpoche describes this as the patch-like pieces coming closer together. But we notice distraction more readily and just simply come back. Traleg Rinpoche says we can extend mindfulness after agitation has occurred and we become fairly proficient. And Trungpa Rinpoche says much the same thing, that we might see tiny flickers of thoughts, but we just see them. We just see them. At this stage, we become aware of refinement of thoughts, and become aware of the most subtle and tiny discursive thoughts. So with that, we've actually been able to settle the mind somewhat. We're able actually to begin to relax the mind and relax and let go of effort. The next stages really deal with increasing degrees of freedom from discursive thoughts and obstacles. Or we could say increasing depth of relaxation of mind. So the fifth stage, the fifth technique is called pacification or taming. Trungpa Rinpoche calls it taming. So pacification or taming. And the idea here, it relates back to what Traleg said about sometimes becoming bored with the practice or losing interest in the practice. And so Traleg says that to counteract discouragement, there are methods of pacifying to tame the mind. And we should start by thinking of the benefits that we gain from meditation, that it allows us to feel more calm and collected, that we experience less emotional turmoil. And he says it's important to remember that it's only through meditation that we can actually achieve liberation. So at this point, we begin to relate more to emotional experiences. Notice they're arising and going. And we come back to awareness, or we simply rest in awareness of the emotions and rest in awareness of the thinking. Trungpa Rinpoche connects this particular power, pacification or taming, to non-aggression. And he says that we no longer experience ourselves as an obstacle or nuisance. In other words, we become to realize as we settle the mind that there's nothing we're lacking, there's nothing we need to fix, there's nothing we need to change, that we can just simply be with ourselves and be with our experience with non-aggression, meaning that we're not trying to change or do anything other than just allow our mind to settle. And this is Trungpa Rinpoche calls this the power of the general recognition of decency. In other texts, it's simply the power of decency. He also calls it the power of awareness, which is the power of becoming increasingly aware that we are experiencing something in meditation, that we're beginning to see something happen, and that we should take this as encouragement, not as a goal, not as a fixed target of some kind, because that will undo what we're trying to achieve here, or what we're trying to accomplish through practice, but that we simply recognize that meditation is doing something for us, with us, to us, however you want to think of it, and that this allows us to relax further into greater non-aggression. The sixth stage of the 9 techniques, or the 9 levels, Traleg Rinpoche calls subjugation. Trungpa Rinpoche called it pacifying. And with this, there's further contemplation or further awareness of the great drawbacks, Traleg says, of failing to practice meditation, that we realize increasingly the harm that comes to us and others when we have no control over conflicting emotions. And that he says it's essential to engage in this kind of contemplation in order to pacify the mind. And Trungpa Rinpoche also talks about this stage, subjugation, or he calls it pacifying, as overcoming our resistance to practice. That again, we really need to appreciate what practice is allowing us to do. We need to really appreciate what we're experiencing through our meditation practice. And this again is connected with the power of decency, or the power of awareness. The 7th stage is called, in Traleg's book, thorough subjugation. Trungpa Rinpoche calls it thoroughly pacifying. And again, Traleg says that we should engage in reflection on the positive rewards of meditation and reaffirm our commitment to applying mindfulness and awareness. And that this level in particular is related to overcoming coarse and especially subtle obstacles of elation and dullness. In other texts, you may hear it as wildness and torpor. But it's overcoming especially those obstacles. Trungpa Rinpoche just says that it's related to just simply coming back and resting in the simplicity of the practice. And this is related to the power of exertion, that we actually are seeing some result in terms of settling, attaining the mind, and allowing our minds to settle and relax. So the 8th and in particularly the 9th stage relate to the last of the 3 stages that Traleg talked about. So this is actualizing mental stability. That's when 5 through 8 were strengthening mental stability. Here we're actualizing or achieving mental stability. The 8th stage is one-pointed concentration, or Trungpa Rinpoche calls it one-pointedness. And at this point, we're so settled in mind. The mind is so relaxed, and we're so attuned, so settled in our awareness that we need only the slightest effort to remain one-pointedly in awareness. Traleg Rinpoche says that at this point we've developed sufficient skills to deal with all of the obstacles to mindful, meditative concentration, including the problems of wildness and dullness, elation and torpor, in both their gross and subtle manifestations. And he says, even if discursive thoughts arise, our minds will remain unwavering in awareness as the result of the combination of mindfulness and awareness. And Trungpa Rinpoche again connects this resting and connects this to post-meditation experience as well. So we're beginning to experience awareness as what Trungpa Rinpoche would call 24-hour practice. That it's we've become so settled in the nature of mind that we recognize awareness in all situations. And this again connects with the power of exertion. And then the 9th stage is, again, meditative equipoise, or Trungpa Rinpoche called this resting evenly. And sometimes in other texts it's called even placement. And the idea here is that we've achieved a stable shamatha, where no effort is required at all to stay one-pointed. Traleg Rinpoche says the final level is the actual attainment of tranquility, that even the notion of one-pointedness is no longer applicable here, because that still implies some effort is being made to apply single-minded concentration. At this point, tranquility meditation has become a natural state of being. I think the key phrase in there is natural state of being, that we're no longer distracted. We're no longer so lost in the display that we forget the essence, that it's become our natural state of being, rather than something maintained through mindfulness and awareness. And Trungpa Rinpoche says at this stage, meditative equipoise or resting evenly, let your mind be as it is naturally. In other words, very often in the Mahamudra teachings, you'll hear words such as uncontrived, unfabricated, that we're not creating anything. That, again, if we try to create something, we're going to fall into obscuration. We're going to fall into an obstacle of some kind. That by allowing the mind to settle, by allowing the mind to relax, by letting go of effort, by letting go of any sense of something to achieve ultimately, that we fall into a natural state of being, where we can let our mind be as it is naturally. Trungpa Rinpoche further says, at this point, you can be you in the purest sense. And the power at this point is the power of familiarity. It's said that we become so familiar with our awareness that we identify completely with it, or completely, we are awareness at this point. So it's that sense of familiarity. Traleg Rinpoche further says that at this stage, we've attained complete mastery over the pliancy of body and mind, and will automatically enter the state of tranquility. So when he talks about pliancy, this is, again, a word that we're familiar with from the path of individual liberation, Xinjiang, that mind has become so thoroughly processed, so thoroughly relaxed, that we're not thrown by anything that arises in mind, that we see that everything that arises in mind arises in the greater space of awareness. So Traleg Rinpoche says that these 3 essential stages, which are summarized in the 9 techniques. Again, that's first calming the agitated mind. Secondly, strengthening that stability. And then finally, actualizing. That these three essential stages culminate in the complete state of tranquility. And he says the first is attained when awareness is present, even while our mind is agitated. And when this happens, disturbing thoughts disperse spontaneously. And he calls this like snow falling on a boulder. The boulder is completely unaffected by whatever happens. The boulder is undisturbed, totally, it's a complete sense of stabilization. The second stage is when a meditative state can be maintained even when disturbing thoughts arise. And he says this is like the flow of a gentle river. Again, we just see whatever arises in mind, thoughts, feelings, perceptions, it's just like the flow of a river. And this is strengthening that stability. And then the third stage is when we gain the ability to maintain a sense of awareness in everyday life. So as Trungpa Rinpoche said, in post-meditation experience as well. We gain the ability to maintain a sense of awareness in everyday life, and our mind is consistently clear and lucid, 24-hour awareness. So this is achieving or actualizing that stability. So with that, he begins to prep us for the next chapter, I feel. He starts talking about insight meditation and says, insight meditation requires a calm and stable mind to be effective. Otherwise, we're too distracted. But mental calming alone will not lead to meditative realization. This is how he began the chapter, if you remember, from last week, that we could say that tranquility meditation or shamatha is necessary, but it's not sufficient, that we need vipassana, we need insight meditation in order to attain liberation. But however, without tranquility, it says without tranquility, we would be overwhelmed by the conceptual proliferation during insight meditation. So we need to experience tranquility meditation in order to fully experience vipassana. And then he says insight meditation is referred to as analytic meditation, but it's an analytic approach that requires a meditative way of thinking. Approach that requires a meditative way of thinking, and a meditative way of thinking requires a serene and focused mind. So I think what he's talking about here will become clear as we begin studying the chapter on insight meditation. But essentially, the idea is that whatever we look at in Vipassana, we're looking at our immediate experience, our experience now. And even if we use a pointing out instruction of some kind, a finger that points to the moon, we're meant to look at the moon, not to get caught up in the finger that's pointing. And I think this will become really clear in the next chapter. We begin to understand what he means by insight meditation. So it requires a meditative way of thinking, which is a settled mind, a mind that recognizes and begins to experience its own true nature. And then again, he quotes a piece from Rangjung Dorje, third Karmapa, and basically says luminous bliss comes from tranquility and insight. The bliss aspect arises from attaining a tranquil mind, while the luminosity aspect arises from cutting through mental fixations by gaining insight into the nature of our mind itself. So that's what we'll be doing when we begin moving into the next chapter, is looking at how insight meditation gives us insight into the nature of our mind and cuts through mental fixations. But again, I think the critical point to understand about Mahamudra Shamatha is that when we allow the mind to settle, when we allow our mind to relax, when we're able to relax any sense of mental effort, that the nature of mind, the essence of mind will become apparent to us. And we'll realize that it was really there all along. It was just obscured. So with that, we have some time, I guess, for discussion and comments and questions. Judith?
The nature of mind. is it the nature of all minds, or is it your particular nature of mind? Is everyone's different, in other words?
In its most fundamental sense, in terms of pure awareness, it is the same. It's the same as what we talked about when we were reading the Vajrayana text, that the nature of the guru's mind is the same as our mind. Now, obviously, there are a lot of particulars in terms of our individual experiences. So, but in its most fundamental sense, awareness is the nature of mind, and awareness is what we're aware of from person to person is different. But the nature of awareness itself, which is what we're meant to look at, not to be, again, caught up in the display, caught up in the particulars, is the same.
Thanks.
At the same time as our individual experiences are all different.
Right.
It's like
Thanks.
we're fish swimming in the ocean. One of us encounters different things, but the ocean is the same for all of us. Or birds flying in the air. Maybe that's better.
Yeah.
Good question, though, Judy.
Oh, it is, yes.
Thanks.
Ed?
First, I want to thank both John and Michael for exceptionally superb presentations this evening, and for really
Here.
trying to, what's the word? Enable us to comprehend this really difficult stuff in a manageable fashion. But what I'd like some comments on, really, and maybe that's all that's possible, is aren't we certainly at the end of the chapter in the prayer of Mahamudra, the great bliss, unceasing without desire, luminosity free from the veil, isn't that the four immeasurables embodied in each of us and manifesting? So the issue is, how do we get from the concept of the four immeasurables to, if you will, being the four immeasurables, which is what I think we're trying to do.
I think he's describing this. It's in a way we're giving up our false individuality. There's still a true individuality. Henry's a woman, I'm a man. I don't have any hair, Michael does. We all have these individual qualifications. But our false individuality is the constant feeling of lack and the desire to fill it with something. The constant feeling of not being where we should be and trying to get there. That feeling of unhappiness. And that sense of individuality is what goes on the path as we come more and more into this space of awareness and begin to realize that this is what we truly are, and that the thought of I and all that it revolved around that was false. And so we're making this journey, ironically, to where we already are, here, in this space. But we're giving up, we're losing confusion and suffering along the way. And that confusion and suffering, you could also call it the sense of I. I, me. Me and my failings, me and my hopes, me and my virtues, me and my weaknesses, whatever me and me. That's what's going. And instead, we're coming back to this here, right now. This is our journey. They call it, they get say again and again that it's ironic, this journey. We're coming home to where we already were, like those kids looking for their father, taking that trip.
So the four immeasurables are not concepts to be discarded or gone beyond, but just to allow them to melt into us.
I think they're really what we realize. And as we realize them, we no longer see them as something separate from us, something to be possessed or achieved, but as what we are, in fact.
Great, thank you very much.
Brent?
Yeah, this is really powerful stuff. And as I'm reading this, John, I'm really struck by your teaching style and what you passed on. Because as I'm going through reading this, I'm like, I find myself going like, wait a minute, I don't know this. I never did this. And I'm like, these not good enough. I'm lacking. But then I read on. I'm like, wait, I've experienced this in like kind of a backwards way. And the what did Dilgo Kensei Rinpoche talk about? The reverse ati. It's that you start from the backwards and then work your way. And it's I kept I just laughed there. I kept finding myself with this conflict of not good enough, and then just laughing like, oh yeah, it's right here, and it's just I don't know, it's brilliant and so there it's so accessible.
Yeah, we all want to make it into something distant that we have to work very hard and get to someday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I find that, like the real practice or exertion is just where Chogyam Trungpa and Path of Individual Liberation, 90% of the effort just sitting your butt down, and then the body it's going to want to move. You're going to have a cramp, and something I learned is like the real reason for yoga is so people could sit longer, and like physical pain in the body and relating to that, and it becomes a very practical thing, and it's not necessarily something to be attained. It's like, okay, your body is a reflection, or there's a connection to the mind that we don't necessarily see right away, but it's happening. So thank you.
And none of us want to accept that we were here all along. We think we have to become vastly improved. And we're very critical of ourselves in that process, in our world. And we say, I'm not there yet. And this path really is about constantly getting there, arriving, by coming back to awareness here. What an irony, huh?
I just had those experiences of seeing through the sense of unworthiness is exactly what Traleg Rinpoche and Trungpa Rinpoche were talking about with that power of decency or power of awareness, that we actually recognize meditation's doing something, and that it's important to take encouragement from that to further our practice.
Mm.
That's that power, the general sense of decency. It's decency about ourselves.
Mark has his hand up.
Hi. I don't really, I shouldn't have my hand raised. I've been very distracted. We're dealing with air quality. I don't know how many of you are addressing this right now, but it's a bit of a problem, and I was just making sure some of the windows. I can't believe how bad it is and how it smells out there. But so I was kind of running around when I shouldn't have been, and I really needed to listen to this. So I'll definitely be listening to the recording. But I found the reading kind of problematic, and somewhat painful for me. But I always try to remember to be gentle. Try to be gentle with myself when I'm having difficulty. And I just had a question coming back to somebody. I don't think we really talked about. Maybe it's too long ago, but the Watcher. And I'm always have issues with the Watcher. And is it silly to be? I don't know. Anyway, just mentioning it and wondering. I always have this. I shouldn't have this view. I guess the Watcher always bothers me. He's like the enemy. I want to take out my Shambhala sword. But anyway, I just wonder if you had any comments on that.
Mm.
Did I confuse? I
No,
see.
no. What about the Watcher bothers you?
Well, I don't know. Was the Watcher never the enemy? Or I don't know. I've always had this funny, silly, neurotic kind of, which I mostly have no problem with. But the Watcher I always felt like it was kind of a distraction from actually experiencing the moment.
It is, and it's the voice of self-doubt.
Right.
And this path, and what we've been talking about tonight, what Traleg is talking about, what Michael recounts from Trungpa Rinpoche, is all about confidence.
Right.
Remember Trungpa Rinpoche, I quote him over and over again. He said, lack of self-confidence is the Buddhist version of original sin. And the Watcher is the embodiment of that.
Mm-hmm.
The Watcher is constantly enacting self-criticism, lack of self-confidence, feeling that things are not where they should be, and wanting to get to where they are. And this is what plunges us into sorrow and confusion. The Watcher is the manifestation of that, the enactment of that self-attack.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say that I went through a pretty long period of time where I had experienced something very much like that. And I can remember, I think it was the first retreat I ever did at Skylake Lodge, and we were doing walking meditation outside, and I actually shouted out loud like, "Oh, shut up." Because it was this, it just it just I kept the Watcher was just there all the time. Oh, should I be doing this? Look at the way I'm doing that. How am I doing? It's like, oh, shut up. and Ed just posted a comment, which is that it, by relaxing and just doing the practice, eventually, it's finally started to fade away. But engaging with it, certainly. You're just encouraging it, man.
Yeah, I think from a Mahamudra point of view, it's one more thing to just simply be aware of, and be aware as well of the judging and the desire to get rid of it and all of that, and just see that.
Thank you.
There are, in Mahamudra Vipassana, there are a lot of different analytic techniques in Mahamudra Vipassana, and actually there is one where you do look at the watcher. Who's watching? What is watching? Where does it go when it stops? Where did it come from when it started? It's the same thing as any other thought. Where does the thought come from? Where is it now? Where does it go? And you kind of realize it's just one more temporary appearance that arises in the greater space of awareness.
These readings, this particular chapter seems to bring out that aspect that I find difficult sometimes. Dealing less with the environment and more with my thoughts and my emotions. If that's kind of what it's about. Anyway.
Usually those thoughts and emotions that are hard to deal with are the watcher. Negative. And the watcher is constantly complaining and wanting to be better, wanting things to be better and saying they're not good enough, which is why the watcher makes us so depressed. Yeah. And when we come present here, it just evaporates. Like any other thought. So that's what we're being enjoined to do, is to constantly come present and let the watcher and all those thoughts go poof, evaporate into air.
Robert has something, and we're almost out of time.
I'll be quick. I just wanted to mention, see, Mark, you were hesitating in asking that question because you were distracted with air quality and other issues, and you just created some of the most interesting dialogue of the night. I never really thought about the watcher. I hadn't heard of the idea before. Maybe I missed it along the way, but that's really helpful. And so I never thought of that. And I think by talking about the watcher as not a thing or a person, but knowing that there are traits and using it as a name to hang on gives it it doesn't feel like it's you. It's overwhelming who you are. So I just learned a lot from that brief conversation. So I hope your air quality stays bad so you can have more great comments for us until it gets better. So thank you, Mark, for doing that.
One last comment, question?
Yeah, with my experience with judge with the watcher reading this text, the not good enough. And I posted it in chat, I was watching myself judge myself, and I just it was just funny. I'm like, where is this coming from? It's like a Muppet. I don't know if you've ever seen the Muppets, where they have the two hecklers in the crowd or in the rafters, and that's sort of my experience with coming into a relationship with the watcher.
Well, should we say the closing chants? I forget who's leading. Sorry, who is it?
I think I was.
Oh, that's right. Check. I'll put them up.
Okay.
So Trip, unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. We'll close by saying a prayer for peace and dedicating the merit earned by our practice to the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times, and my prayers of pure aspiration. May wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Michael, and everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night. Thank
Good luck
you.
with the prayer, Mark.
John and everybody and Michael
No.
and the whole group. Thank
Bye,
you.
Judy. Bye, Judith. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
All right.